The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Time is ticking away, but it looks like we're getting closer to a vote to possibly open the door for a new stadium to be built on the RFK site. We'll get into that coming up. Kliff Kingsbury expressing some reservations about Bill Belichick working as a college football coach, and he's done both. He's been a head coach in college, he's been a head coach in the pros, and now he's the offensive coordinator of the Commanders, and what he said yesterday brings up a couple of interesting questions, which we will get to. The Commanders look like they're going to face a backup quarterback on Sunday who's thrown only 29 career passes, so that looks promising. And how about the Ravens as 16.5-point favorites going into their game on the road against the Giants on Sunday? Now, that is not the biggest point spread in NFL history, if you're curious about that. This goes back to 2013 when Denver was, and this was, I guess, was it post Peyton Manning? I'm not sure. Maybe it was, I believe it was. They were 28-point favorites against winless Jacksonville. They won only by 16. But, boy, to be 16.5-point favorites on the road for a team that has 5 losses like Baltimore, that's surprising. But the Giants are a mess. They're a complete dumpster fire. And it's good to see that from another organization after all the years that we went through, having a dumpster fire around here. Speaking of a mess, I would say right now, Vernon Davis is off the historical hook in San Francisco. Remember this from 2008 and his coach, Mike Singletary?
I will not tolerate players that think it's about them when it's about the team. And we cannot make decisions that cost the team and then come off the sideline and it's nonchalant. No. You know what? This is how I believe, okay? I'm from the old school. I believe this. I would rather play with 10 people and just get penalized all the way until we got to do something else, rather than play with 11 when I know that right now that person is not sold out to be a part of this team. It is more about them than it is about the team. I cannot play with them, cannot win with them, cannot coach with them, can't do it. I want winners. I want people that want to win.
Now, as a coach, he was a great linebacker. Yeah, a Hall of Fame as a linebacker for the Chicago Bears. As a head coach, not so much. But that was a Hall of Fame rant from Mike Singletary when he was the coach of the 49ers in 2008. And Vernon Davis got called for an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, which cost them a drive that was going down the field. And when he came off the field, Singletary said, "Get out of here. I'm sending you to the locker room right now. Shower up and get the hell out of here. I don't want to look at you anymore." So last night, we had something that topped that. Now, what happened in the game is almost secondary to all this. This is something I've never seen before in the NFL, and I don't think that there's any doubt that Devondre Campbell is going to be cut if he hasn't been cut already. The game was a stinker, and it's more Thursday night nonsense as far as I'm concerned this late in the season, where you're pushing teams to play on short rest, and we got the Ravens and 3 other teams going into a stretch now where they're going to play 3 games over a 10-day period. That can't be good. That can't be good in the NFL. And here you had the Rams coming off the highest-scoring game of the season where they had just beaten Buffalo 44-42. And we had a game with no touchdowns for the first time this season. Rams beat the 49ers 12-6. The teams combined for 11 punts, 9 first downs, and 197 yards 4 days after they both had season highs in points. So that's not good, and there's nothing that's going to be done about it because this is a big revenue source for the NFL. They put games on as many nights of the week as possible and days of the week, which is why we're going to have games on Wednesday because Christmas Day falls on a Wednesday. The NFL goes, well, we can't pass up that great television opportunity. People are home. We're going to put games on. And that's just the way it is. But this game stunk last night. It was terrible. Just field goals, played in the rain, and the Rams got 4 field goals from Joshua Carty, and they won the game 12-6. But that's not the story of the game. Story of the game is this. Devontae Campbell has been starting throughout the season because Dre Greenlaw, who tore his Achilles in the Super Bowl, hasn't been healthy enough to play. He was finally ready to go last night, got his starting position back, and Campbell was on the sidelines. So then Greenlaw comes up with a sore knee, and they got another linebacker who's a little bit hurt there, D. Winters. And so he's got a neck issue. So Kyle Shanahan sends in the backup linebacker, Devondre Campbell. Okay, next man up. This is how it works in the NFL. You're going to play. He didn't want to go in the game. Didn't want to go into the game. I mean, wasn't like he was upset. Oh, well, okay, now you want me. No, he would not go in. And in the third quarter, he put a towel over his head, and he walked off the field. And, you know, the reporters after the game and talking to Shanahan, they didn't know exactly what happened there. You know, was it an injury? Was he not feeling well? Why did he walk off the field? This is what we call a montage. It's the various questions with the sound bites from Kyle Shanahan explaining what is an unbelievable situation in the NFL.
Devondre Campbell, he didn't play and he went into the locker room at some point.
Yeah, he said he didn't want to play today.
Play today?
Yep.
The coaching staff?
He did when I asked him why he didn't want to go in. So.
During the game or before?
No, that was in the third quarter.
Has that ever happened to you where a player said they didn't want to play in a game?
No.
He got demoted for this game, right? I mean, he was not going to play.
No, he was gonna go in when Dre came out.
Were you released, Devondre Campbell?
I don't. We'll figure out something, but I don't know that right now.
Did he give you any reason why you didn't want to play today?
No.
Campbell, I mean, to hear a player say, "I don't want to play today," does that create dissension, especially knowing that at this point in the season, with the type of season that this has started out to be, you kind of need as much camaraderie as possible to be successful? Does that create dissension amongst the team, or did it not really affect anyone? Did no one really notice?
People notice, but when someone says that you move on. You don't deal with that anymore.
With Devondre opting to not go into the game, what do you need to do to ensure that you don't lose the rest of the locker room?
I haven't lost anybody. That's somebody who doesn't want to play football. It's pretty simple. I mean, I think our team and myself, we know how we feel about that. So I don't think we need to talk about him anymore.
Well, you're not going to stop talking about him because this is remarkable. Now, this happened without anybody really noticing with the Ravens a couple of weeks ago. So they got a wide receiver who's suspended. He only had one catch this season. So, you know, that happened and the Ravens dealt with it. They said they were suspending him for refusing to go into the game, but this was a dire situation. They were down to their last linebacker. They finally had to put in Demetrius Flanagan-Foles, who I've never heard of. He's got a lot of names. I don't know if he's any good, but that's what they were left with because he refused to go into the game. George Kittle is a captain on this team, and he was angry on two fronts. One, that he was a part of a team where a guy was inserted into the game. It's only a 53-man roster, and they only make 47 active for the game. It's not like a college sideline where you got 100 guys. And he refused to go in the game. Kittle was angry about that and the fact that as a team captain, nobody told him what was happening on the sideline.
Because I'm a leader on the team, and if that is something that is being a distraction on the sideline, I would love to voice my own opinion in the moment. And now we're past that moment, so it doesn't matter what I wish I could have said or wish I could have done. But I don't like distractions on the sideline. I think that's ignorant, and I think it's just dumb. It's just stupid, and it's very immature. And I just don't see how that's I just don't see how you can do something like that to your team.
George, you are one of the leaders on the team, and this isn't familiar territory. You guys haven't gotten used to losing. What do you want to see from this team as far as effort, energy, whatever, down the stretch, if indeed you guys are not going to the playoffs?
You know what? I'm just going to quote my safety, Huff. He broke the team down after the game, and he said that his mindset and his attitude will be 100% effort on every single day, every practice, every single rep, and he will fight until the wheels fall off because he has been fighting his ass off to get back on the football field this year, And he has only gotten so many reps, and he's played really, really good football for us. And he said that he's just going to bring it, and he expects everybody around him to also bring in fiery energy, to bring the passion, no matter what circumstances are, no matter what percentage, no matter what odds have to happen for us to continue playing later this year. But we just have to focus on this one game, take these 3 days, get away, and show up on Monday with great intent and great effort.
I left that question in because I think it illustrates how professionals act. It doesn't matter what the score is or where the season is. You are paid handsomely to do a job. You are expected to do a job. And having covered quite a few training camps in my lifetime and have seen guys who would give anything just to get on the field for one play, I mean, they would sell their soul for that. And to see a guy who's sent into a game where he's needed to play and he refuses to go in because he's in a snit over the fact that the starting linebacker is ready to play and ready to get back on the field, the guy who helped them get to a Super Bowl last year, and you're going to get your nose out of joint because of that? What, are you kidding me? I don't think there's any question whether he's going to be cut today. And while Shanahan wouldn't address that, another player on the team, Charvarius Ward, did say after the game that he does think that they will cut Campbell. He said, quote, he's a professional. He's been playing for a long time. If he didn't want to play, he shouldn't have dressed out. He could have told them that before the game. I feel like that was some kind of sucker-S that he did. It definitely hurt the team. D went down. We needed a linebacker. So for him to do that, that's some stuff, in my opinion. He's probably going to get cut soon. So it is what it is. Yes, they don't think they have any choice on this. I mean, I don't know how Kyle Shanahan can look at the rest of his players and keep this guy on the team. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. And he had to know the score when he signed with the team. He knew that at some point Dre Greenlaw was going to come back and claim his position, just a placeholder. And, okay, when Greenlaw was ready to play, he got to start again, and so he had to sit on the bench, and this is how he handles it. This was the Thursday night crew on Prime, starting off with Richard Sherman on what they witnessed and what they heard from the locker room after this 12-6 loss for the 49ers.
This is a situation where frustration. The player's frustrated. Dre Greenlaw came back, and they were going to give him the opportunity to play. He's a all-pro style player, Pro Bowl type player, guy who's been incredibly impactful. There was some frustration from Devondre that, hey, I played the whole season. I've put my work in, put my time in. You just can't do it, though. You know, this is a team sport. It's not like they just replaced you with a Jag. They didn't replace you with somebody who's not a guy. This is a guy who's been an impactful player for this team for a long time. So it's frustration, and you kind of can empathize with him to a degree, but you quit on your team. And you can't do that in the National Football League. I'd be surprised if he's on the team after that.
Yeah, I think those emotions sometimes get the best of you, and you just lose lack of judgment there. Just because at the end of the day, like when you walk off this field, you know, in 5 years from when you're done playing, you're going to want to be proud of who you were as a teammate, who you were as the guy in tough situations for your team. And yeah, maybe this does affect you negatively in this current moment that you're in, but you don't want to react in a way that my emotions now turn into something that affect the people around me. Now people trust me less in a moment where a game that's a one-score game, I can make a huge impact in this game somehow, some way if I get out there and help my team. And maybe your emotions tell you that. Now, if you say, hey, this is it, I'm done, I don't want to play this game anymore, I'm done with that, I mean, I think that's a totally different conversation.
Yeah, Antonio Brown, have you guys ever experienced anything like that, being in a locker room with a teammate?
Yeah, I was at the game. Antonio took his shirt off.
Yeah, but
that's right.
But what I'm saying, he never came back. Like, that was the end of Antonio.
He took an Uber to the airport.
Right. Well,
yeah, and Vontae Davis was the other one. R.I.P. Vontae Davis. He was the one that, with the Bills, I believe, at halftime, ended up just saying, I'm done playing. So.
Done playing, but we're not assuming he's done playing. This is just more of a
where it's frustrating because Dre was done. Dre was done at that point, and you could have came in and made a positive impact and helped your team win the game. That's why you continue to play. That's why you continue to have a positive attitude regardless of the circumstances, because you never know how it's going to shake out in the end. You could have been the hero today, but now you walked out on your team in a game that was a winnable ball game, and you put your team in a hard position, and now they lose the ball game because they can't replace the impact that you could have made.
And it's incredibly immature, and you probably will be released now. I mean, and maybe that went through his mind, too. He's probably like, you know what, I'm walking out, I'm making a decision. More likely, they will probably cut me tomorrow. And if I'm the coaching staff, I'm cutting you.
Yeah, but you remember moments, right? So guys who play with him, what are they going to remember probably from their time playing with him, right? Short time here, that's the moment they're going to remember. And is that what you really want to be known for? That's why I say your emotions sometimes can put you in a situation to do things that aren't really what your priorities are and what you stand for.
Yeah, Mr. Campbell not only ended his time with the 49ers, he probably ended his time as an NFL player. He may be bouncing around in the minor leagues or maybe in the summer, UFL now, but he's done as an NFL player with a remarkable act of selfishness and stupidity. Just it's hard to believe. Now, Ryan Fitzpatrick mentioned Devontae Davis. Kind of ironic where I played the rant from Mike Singletary about Vernon Davis, who, by the way, later said that he credits Mike Singletary for really turning himself around. He really gave him a wake-up on that, and he went on to have a great career. He won a Super Bowl with Denver and finished up here with the Redskins, played well with them, and had an outstanding 13, 14-year NFL career. So that was early on, 2008, when that happened. But Vontae Davis, his late brother, Fitzpatrick, had played with him with the Buffalo Bills, and yes, he did retire at halftime. He came into the locker room, took off his stuff, and left, and said, "That's it for me." That was also selfish, but not quite as selfish as this. Hey, the coach needs you. Nah, not going in the game, just going in the locker room. Wow. And again, I have been around enough football players whose dream was to get on the field for just one play, and how hard they worked to do that, or guys coming back from injuries, how much they wanted to get back and play. Look at Alex Smith, all the money that he was guaranteed. And if you saw the E60 on the broken leg and how devastating it was, and to see him come back on the field and try and play again when he didn't have to, that's guys who love football. And obviously, Mr. Campbell, Devontae Campbell, does not. Coming up, Bill Belichick loves football, and now he loves college football. Does he love it enough to stay with college football? We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
What would have seemed like an absurd idea only about a week ago is a reality now. Bill Belichick is the new head coach of the University of North Carolina football team. Yeah. Now there's been all kinds of speculation as to why this happened. Was it the NFL saying no to Belichick, or was it Belichick saying no to the NFL? Very interesting story written by Seth Wickersham at ESPN yesterday. I urge you to read it. We'll get to what Wickersham said about it on the Rich Eisen Show in just a moment. But this was Belichick, not exactly a great public speaker, but much more loquacious than his usual interviews before and after games when he was coaching the New England Patriots. And he showed up at the news conference and played along with the big dog and pony show. You know, the athletic director had cut the sleeves off his sport coat. Ha, ha, ha. They gave Belichick a hoodie without sleeves with North Carolina's logo on it. And he brought out his dad's old sweatshirt when his dad coached at North Carolina when he was a very little kid, and then later went on to Navy and coached there for, I think, 50 years. But this was Belichick, as warm and fuzzy as he gets after being introduced as the new head coach at North Carolina.
I've always wanted to coach in football, coach in college football, and it just never really worked out. Had some good years in the NFL, so that was okay. But this is really kind of a dream come true. I grew up in college football with my dad. As a coach at Navy for 50 years, so as a kid, all I knew was college football, and so it's great to come back home to Carolina, and back in an environment that I really grew up in. When you're little, you don't remember everything. Obviously, I was too young to remember a lot of things from Carolina, but as I grew up, you hear the same story over and over and over and over again, and so. One story I always heard was Billy's first words were, "Beat Duke." So, full circle. But again, very grateful and appreciative for the opportunity. This is a great process. I've learned so much about the university and the support that we have for the football program. And this is, obviously a great educational school, and the kids here are outstanding. And we want to transfer that over to the football field and have an outstanding football team with those student athletes. So I'm here to as Bubba said, teach, develop, and build the program in the way that I believe in. And so grateful to have Michael, with me in this process. Michael and I have worked together for going all the way back over 30 years. And, he has a great knowledge of the general manager role, if you will, in this type of position with terms of, scouting 2 sets of players, high school players and college portal players, as well as dealing with some version of what's called salary cap, which is now, part of college football. So all that being said, I look forward to working, here. I talked to the players a little earlier, and, that was a great opportunity to start to get to know them and start to build the program. And I'm excited to continue that process. And also met with Coach Kitchens, who will be, the first member of the staff that we hire. And, I have a ton of respect for him, as well as for Mac. There's a lot of respect for Mac and his career, what he's done. So also look forward to, connecting with him down the road. But excited to be here, excited to be in college football, excited for the opportunity to build and develop young student athletes, young men, and prepare them for their life, either in the NFL or professionally. But the lessons they learn will be professional lessons. They'll be pros in all areas, and that's what we want to develop, as well as having a winning program, a successful program. But we want to develop good people and good kids and good football players.
So little Billy's first words were beat Duke. That's warm and fuzzy, and that's nice, and all that. And get to this column that was written by Seth Wickersham, and not a column, but an investigative report. And he and Don Van Natta are 2 of the best. Sometimes they team up, and they did, I think, a great job with Washington in helping to get Dan Snyder out the door with a long report that came out 2 years ago. But this was Wickersham yesterday on the Rich Eisen show explaining that this was more Bill Belichick saying to the NFL, I don't want you, versus the NFL saying to him, we don't want you. And he goes through this Zoom call that's been taking place throughout the season with his guys. It's like Tony Soprano and his crew. He's got Matt Patricia, who worked with him in New England a couple of times, Josh McDaniel, who's been with him, Michael Lombardi, who was with him in Cleveland and in New England and is going to run the front office, though he's never worked, as far as I know, in college before, so I don't know how that's going to work. But also, the feeling after reading this is that college football has become more like the NFL that Belichick thrived in than the NFL is now. And there were many things that he looked at for coming back that were just not going to work. Like the most attractive job would be the Chicago Bears, right, with Caleb Williams and a quarterback that you can develop, and maybe he becomes the next Tom Brady. But the feeling was they're going to go young. They're looking at Ben Johnson, who was the first choice here, apparently, for the Commanders, elected to stay in Detroit, and knows the division, would make the transition to become coach of the Bears. Seems to be their first choice. The Jets would seem to be a natural choice, but he hates Woody Johnson. Worked for him before, doesn't want to go back there. The Giants would be a perfect situation. He was the defensive coordinator there where they won 2 Super Bowls. But Brian Daboll is the coach there. He worked for Belichick. He doesn't want to push him out the door. And that's going to be a total rebuild, it looks like. And he's 72 years old, so that doesn't make sense. And then there's some issues with Jacksonville, too, so he probably wouldn't want to go there. So he's been, hanging out with his son, who's the defensive coordinator at the University of Washington. He presumably would come with him to coach at North Carolina. Bill O'Brien, his former offensive coordinator, now the head coach at Boston College. He's been hanging with him. And this was, as one unnamed person close to Belichick said to Seth Wickersham, this was his FU to the NFL. And, quote, he was tired of the stupidness of the NFL, and he's, quote, disgusted. And he's also realized that the NFL is no longer about a situation where it can be coach-centric. And do you remember almost 5 years ago when Ron Rivera was introduced, Dan Snyder wished everybody a happy Thanksgiving on January 2nd and said it would be a coach-centric operation. They were a complete disaster in the draft. They had one season that wasn't a losing season, and he was out the door after a 4-win year. So that does not work anymore. And this college, that's what it is. It's coach-centric. He's the grand poobah. So that's why he's at North Carolina and not waiting for the hiring cycle in the NFL. And as Seth Wickersham explained yesterday on the Rich Eisen show,
2024 has not been the easiest year for Belichick, right? He got fired. He got one interview out of the 7 openings subsequently. And, as Don Van Natta and Jeremy Fowler and I reported, he didn't finish in anybody's top 3 in the Atlanta Falcons. The Dynasty docuseries comes out, which we're going to roundly minimizes his role in that, tries to erase it, and former players come out, in defense of him. And then the season rolls around. So he's got all these media gigs that I think he did very well. But every week, he and his former Patriots assistants, all of whom are out of the gig, are, they would meet on Zoom and they would go through every team, every game, every situation. They had incredibly detailed notes, as only the Patriots did it. And the subtext of it all is what jobs are going to open, what jobs are going to consider Belichick, and what jobs would he want. And I think that midway through the year, he asked the people on that call to look more into college programs, not excluding NFL programs, but also add college into it. And I think that the way he spent the fall going to a ton of college games, seeing his son Steven out in Washington a lot, and trying to survey the landscape and think about how he wants to spend his last, years coaching, made college more appealing.
So let me dig into those Zoom calls a little bit more. So every week, Bill would get the band back together. Who was in the band?
The band.
Who was on the Zoom calls that were staying as current as possible in the NFL or football trends, Seth?
I mean, a lot of the people that you saw, on his podcast, adding in, Josh McDaniels and Joe Judge at times, some of those guys. But, I think that what they were doing was they were, trying to stay current on the game and also thinking about what situation, again, might be best for them should it arise.
So which gigs do you think they were targeting in the NFL that they thought were now out of the reach for Belichick to the point where, or not out of reach, or just be too dicey to pass up North Carolina's opportunity to roll the dice on, Seth?
I think the general consensus was that the Bears were probably the best situation for a coach to go into. That said, I think there was severe skepticism that they were going to look at Belichick. I think they thought, that team's probably going to go offense to try to salvage, Caleb Williams and give him a good shot at having a good career. Then there was the Giants. And, the Giants on paper looked like a great match. Belichick going home, it would be a great story. But there's 2 things that happened there. Number one, Belichick has a great respect for Brian Daboll and thinks that he should be continuing to coach the Giants. And number 2 is if they happen to turn to him, that roster, I think they thought it was further away than maybe they realized. And this was going to be the 3rd year that he was in coaching. So 22, 23, and then 25, if he had been with the Giants, that the press would have been at him. And a daily topic is whether he's lost his fastball. And I think that's pissed him off, frankly, from what I've been told, and he's sick of it. And then you had these other situations, Dallas, who knows if they're going to make the change, and who knows if they kind of value the idea of a coach enough that they would want to bring in someone like Belichick. Jacksonville, Michael Lombardi on his podcast kind of took a shot at Tony Khan, Shad Khan's child, about his son, about, running the analytics department. I mean, Belichick and Tony have gotten along well, but again, it's impossible to know if he would have gotten any of these jobs. He easily could have ended up with one interview again, and who knows if he would have gotten it. And he was going to coach next year, no matter what. He never wavered from it. He was going to coach. And as the college landscape came around, I think that a lot of the scars from the past year and, situations where he would have had to compromise on some things and maybe wasn't as okay with that as he thought he might be. I think it gives him a chance to run the program the way that he wants to run it with the people that he likes spending his time with. And it's a new challenge. And, don't count out a legend with a chip on the shoulder and looking for something to prove. I think he's going to do really well there.
Oh, there's some debate on that, and we'll get to that coming up in the next hour, what Stuart Mandel has written in The Athletic and explained yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show. There's also this to throw in and something to think about. Now, Belichick was asked at the news conference yesterday, what if the NFL comes calling? And he said, I didn't come here to leave. Now, that doesn't necessarily slam the door shut. And then yesterday, Kliff Kingsbury, at his weekly availability, they make the coordinators available every Thursday. Kingsbury, who's been the head coach at Texas Tech and head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, so he's been in the Belichick shoes, coaching both. Now, he coached at Texas Tech when they didn't have NIL and the transfer portal and so forth. So college football's different now in many ways, in a big way, than it was then. But listen to what Kingsbury says, having done both and having coached against and observed Belichick for a long time.
I will have to see him on the sideline to believe that's happening. We'll see how the NFL job search goes and all that. I will have to see him on the sideline coaching in Chapel Hill to believe that's happening.
The landscape has changed a ton even since you were there because of NIL. Could you imagine having to deal with that these days?
I got to just sit around and observe last year, and no, I don't see my man going in any home visits or doing like the cocktail hour after the visits. I just don't. Maybe he'll set it up like an NFL deal, but I have to see that to believe it.
Well, two things. The home visits are pretty much non-existent now. Everything's done by Zoom. I mean, unless you're pursuing the best of the best quarterback, a 5-star recruit, I don't think you get guys jumping on planes anymore. That's changed. Dion doesn't do it that way. He doesn't do any home visits, and I think it's all about money, really, and whether you make a connection. And I don't even know if players visit schools anymore. It's just like, make your offer, and that's where I'm going to go. So there's that, and that's why he's got Mike Lombardi to do that. But the thing that Kingsbury said in the first part of that, in fact, let me play this again, because listen carefully. When he talks about the NFL hiring cycle, okay? This is now December. The hiring cycle gets ramped up in just over a month, about a month from now. So listen to what he says at the beginning of this.
I will have to see him on the sideline to believe that's happening. We'll see how the NFL job search goes and all that. I will have to see him on the sideline coaching.
So listen to that. So we'll see how the NFL cycle goes, the hiring cycle. Belichick got a 5-year, $50 million contract, which is $10 million a year, but half of what he's making with the Patriots. Not that, he's going to have any trouble making ends meet, but the buyout is the most interesting part of this. This is reported by The Athletic's Brendan Marks. The buyout before June 1st of 2025. Season doesn't start till late August. The buyout before June 1st is $10 million. June 2nd, it drops to $1 million. Theoretically, Belichick could wait till June 2nd, and who knows? Jerry Jones wakes up on June 2nd and says, okay, it's time. I know I gave Mike McCarthy a contract extension, but I'll just eat it. I can get Bill Belichick. Calls up Bill Belichick. Hey, it's $1 million to buy yourself out of the deal at North Carolina. I'll give you the $1 million. But on top of that, the $10 million, that's not going to deter any NFL team. They'll just throw it on top of the contract. If you want Bill Belichick, you hire him for, well, I don't know, would you go as high as twice what Carolina's paying him? That $20 million is not out of the question for an NFL coach now. So you bring him in, you give him $100 million and make it $110 because you're going to buy out the contract. I mean, that's the crazy thing about this. And now, Belichick, he would look pretty foolish in this, go this cozy little news conference that he had yesterday and telling little anecdotes about little Billy saying beat Duke and all that in his father's sweatshirt. It was all warm and fuzzy. But, this is big business. This is, he could just say, hey, I changed my mind. What are you doing here in Dallas, Coach, well, things change. Things change. I know the athletic director cut the sleeves off of his jacket and made a big to-do, but I don't think it's out of the question. And I found what Kingsbury said yesterday to be very, very telling. It may not happen. It may go just as it's planned, that he goes through the whole offseason, does all the recruiting. But, if the players are getting paid and they can leave what they want, I don't think it's as damaging as it used to be. And I think it would be acceptable, let's put it that way, if he were to walk away before he ever coached a game. Somehow or another, people would get over it. And it wouldn't be, the poor kids, you left them in a lurch. No, they got their money, and he got his money, and he gave money back, and he left. He went back to the NFL, which is what he really wants to do, I think, and beat Don Shula's record. But for now, he's saying all the right things, actually saying things, which he never really did in New England, and it's all planned to be a wonderful thing where people are, throwing bouquets. Read Sally Jenkins today in the Post. She thinks it's wonderful that Bill is a teacher. But I don't know. I find what Kliff Kingsbury said yesterday to have quite a bit of weight. All right, Eric Flack, who I think has done a great job with Channel 9 reporting on the stadium progress. He's really on top of these things. And he had a story last night that the decks have been cleared so that there can be a vote on the RFK Stadium bill next week before the Senate recesses for winter. And then essentially this would end the possibility that there would be a vote for like another year and maybe even 2 years. So the clock is really ticking on this. We're down to basically a week before this can happen. But he reported that the stadium bill is included in the Senate's continuing budget resolution, which would allow it to become law when the larger spending bill is passed. And according to what Flack is reporting, D.C.'s all-out blitz to bring the Commanders back is now nearing reality. In a separate piece, he notes that the bill has been attached to the government spending bill to receive final approval. So, in other words, this is in the D.C. budget, too, because they're going to have to contribute a lot of money, maybe even $1 billion, to help get this stadium built. Josh Harris is going to build it, but they're going to have infrastructure, and there's going to have to be additional money ponied up. I mean, it used to be that the NFL would tell NFL owners, don't build your own stadium. Get the city to build it for you. And Stan Kroenke said, the hell with that, and he paid $5 billion to build the stadium that the Rams and the Chargers play in now, because he can do it. And then they said, okay, then you're taking the Rams out of St. Louis? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to charge you a $500 million relocation fee, and we're only going to give you 10 years to pay it off. And Kroenke said, $500 million relocation fee? Well, I'll write you a check. Yeah, so that's where the money is now. So looks like this is cleared. Also, according to what Flack is reporting, that there is now bipartisan support on this, and the roadblock that had been in the way from Maryland, where they're looking for two things: one, making sure that there's funding to rebuild the Key Bridge, and also they want to make sure, and I think this is an important part of the equation that nobody talks about, that just as RFK right now is a rotting eyesore where it is, they don't want what now is Northwest Stadium 20 years from now to be that, just a falling, rotting piece of garbage. That there's got to be some plan for that. Now, could they reconfigure it and make it a place where you could have a lot of concerts and maybe some, maybe even high school football games? Who knows? But you just don't want it to go out of use, because it's just becomes a mess. And then what do you do with it? You got to tear it down. What do you do with the land? All that stuff. So that is in play. And Ben Cardin, the Maryland senator, along with Chris Van Hollen, said they had planned to block the bill until the governor, Wes Moore, was satisfied with plans for what they would do with Northwest Stadium. There was also this comment yesterday from the mayor, who is looking at the clock, looking at the calendar, and saying the recess is coming up a week from today. Let's get this done.
In the legislative process, there are twists and turns. There are negotiations. And we believe that the parties are negotiating in good faith, and now it's time to move the legislation. It's time to move the legislation. It's time to move the legislation.
Sounds like she wants the legislation to move, and who doesn't? So I still think it's a possibility that this doesn't happen. And even if the RFK bill passes, it's not 100%, though we're a lot closer to reality that it happens. It's not 100% that the district makes a deal with the Josh Harris group to build there. That still has to be done. But what you would have now, if you're not familiar with the terms, it would extend the lease because the land is it's federal land. They would extend the lease 99 years, and they would rezone so that you could have commercial property around the stadium. Right now it's zoned for residential, so if you had commercial property, then it becomes a realistic proposition that you would have a stadium there, and the goal would be 2030. And as we know from Nats Park, if you do it right, now they threw up what is now Northwest Stadium in 18 months. That was supposed to be a 3-year project. It went up in 18 months, and you can see what it is now, almost 30 years later. But if all goes well, you put a shovel in the ground by 2026, and maybe you're coming around the bend 2029, and you're open for play in 2030. That's the goal. But that's... how many more seasons is that? That's 2025, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 5 more years. 5 more years at Northwest Stadium. Optimistically, if everything happens the way they hope it will, we'll have a new place for the team to play back in D.C., back on the RFK site. But that's 2030. That's 5 more seasons. That's that's longer than the average NFL career, much longer. So keep your fingers crossed on that. But I think a significant development reported by Eric Flack on Channel 9 last night. All right, coming up, Ravens preview. We'll hear also from John Harbaugh as they go in as huge favorites, and also Stuart Mandel of The Athletic on why he believes the Bill Belichick to the North Carolina football team will be a disaster. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. All right, it's Friday, and most Fridays we do Ravens preview, even when they're off, as they were last week. But they got a game this week. They're going to New York to play the Giants as 16.5-point favorites. They should win the game. Giants are a mess, but Ravens did lose earlier this year to the Raiders, and they have only 2 wins. So, as they say, on any given Sunday, you never know what's going to happen. That's the second part of it, by the way, on any given Sunday. Now it just works as it explains everything. On any given Sunday. Well, if you just heard that for the first time, what does that mean? It means that anything is possible in the NFL. We've seen some monster upsets over the years, but at this point, the Ravens, who have just really an outside shot of winning the division, trailing Pittsburgh by 3 games, though they got a rematch with them coming up. They're also fighting for their playoff lives. I didn't think that would happen for a team that almost got to the Super Bowl last year, but they've had some tough losses along the way, and they've got a stretch coming up that's, it's put together by the NFL because of money, but it cannot be healthy for the players. You're asking them to play 3 games in 10 days, and in the case of the Ravens, 2 of them are on the road. So, that's a tough stretch for them. But we'll talk about that with Brian Wacker of the Baltimore Sun, who's going to join us at 10:30. Washington off the bye week, back to work, refreshed, tan, rested, ready to go, going to New Orleans, playing a backup quarterback, 7.5-point favorites on the road. All seems good. And the defense, which, has had its issues over the course of the season, has been playing better recently. And although they had some problems against Dallas, but they get a big boost, it appears, with Marshawn Lattimore finally ready to play. He has not been able to play since they acquired him from the Saints at the trade deadline early last month. And also, with the bye week, you had a chance for the players and the coaches to kind of assess where everything is. And now you got this stretch run coming up. Joe Whitt, defensive coordinator, media availability every Thursday. This was his state of the team as he was asked about it yesterday.
We're close, but we're not consistent enough, and I got to do a better job of getting them consistent and making sure that in winning moments that we're ready to go. We started a lot of games really well. One thing that popped out to me was I think we're 3rd in the league in the first quarter of allowing points. We don't give up points, but in the fourth quarter, we're last in the league. We give up too many points in the fourth quarter. And so how do I shore that up? Is it the calls? Is it the situations? What is it that's allowing that to happen? And that's one area that we really looked at. We looked at the run game as well, okay? Once again, calls first, okay? Technique second, utilization of players third. And so those are areas that we really stressed. And then ball production. We have to produce the ball some one way or another. We changed some drills this week, and hopefully that we will be able to produce the ball the way that we should.
That's been a big frustration for him, and I think everybody connected with the defense. It hasn't been something that has gotten a lot of attention because they've done an excellent job holding on to the football as an offense. And with a rookie quarterback, it just doesn't happen very often. It happened with RG3. He had a remarkable number in his rookie year. He threw 20 touchdown passes and only 5 interceptions. You're going to have 3 or 4 that are just going to happen because they bounce off a receiver's hand. I mean, sometimes it's no fault of the quarterback, but the fact that what does he have? 4 interceptions. I think it's 4 interceptions for Daniels through these 13 games. That's remarkable. That's really been helpful. So the fact that the defense hasn't produced as many turnovers as Whitt or anybody else would like, it's not magnified by the fact that the offense has had a problem turning over the football. They're not putting that defense in short fields very often, and that's a big deal. And this number is just incredible in a 16-game season. With the season now going to 17, eventually 18, and probably 20. In 1983, which was a year that Washington got to the Super Bowl but didn't win. That's when they got their doors blown off by the Raiders. They were plus 43 on turnovers. Plus 43. That's incredible. If you're double digits, that's good. But that's part of the reason that the offense was so prolific. They set a record which has since been broken, but they scored 561 points that season. Turnovers are huge, both obviously for defense, but also for offense as well. And if they gave maybe more short fields to Jaden Daniels, they'd be scoring more points. But also the fact that Daniels doesn't turn it over is very important for them. Number 2 from Whitt, and this is about getting Marshawn Lattimore back. Would it allow, because you now have more security in the secondary, would it allow, he was asked, you to put more pressure on the quarterback?
I don't know if I can pressure more than we've been pressuring because we, like I've been saying, and I don't know if people believe me or not, but we've pressured a lot. We haven't protected the corners. It'd be hard for me to pressure more than what we have. I think I looked at the numbers. I think the pressure calls, I'm around 5th or 6th in the league of the amount that we call.
You wouldn't think that, but that's the case. They do not get a lot of sacks, but the pressure, he says, has been good. It also, I guess, addresses the weaknesses that they have in the secondary, and especially, as he said, when they're giving up points late in the game. Number 3 from Whitt, having Lattimore back is one thing, but also the fact that he will be able to get up to speed. Remember when they got Noah Brown right before the season started? He was one of the last cuts by Houston, and I don't know if he would have made a difference in that first game that they played at Tampa, but he was not ready to play. He was not up to speed on the defense. The fact that Lattimore hasn't been able to play, that's a negative because of the injury, but the positive is he's had plenty of time to learn the system.
It's really a blessing because he's been in there with Jason Simmons and Will Gay, and they've been teaching him. And William, because he played for me, he understands how I want to see it. He understands how to communicate it to a player because he played for me for 4 years. And so that's just been really good that he's had the opportunity. So he'll be further along right now than he would be if he had played right when he got here. And nobody wants him to be hurt. Nobody. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that the benefit of it is he's further along in the defense than he would have been, that first week.
So that's good. I'll be ready to play, and I'm ready to go on Sunday and back right where he started. I remember this, too. This is a funny story. Jim Lachey, who is one of the great trades that Bobby Beathard ever made. It was Jay Schrader. Jay Schrader had a great year in 1986. They got to the NFC Championship game, and they lost 17-0 to the Giants. They come back in 1987. He's the starting quarterback at the beginning of the year. Doug Williams, who almost got traded to the Raiders before the season started. They had a deal in place, and Joe Gibbs at the last minute said, no, we can't do that. I just have a feeling he's going to help us this year, which obviously he did. But Schrader struggled. He did not play well in those games. He got hurt the first game, came back, and was in and out. They one time he benched Schrader, then he benched Williams. Finally made Williams the starter going into the playoffs, and then they got to the Super Bowl, and the rest is history. So we get to the start of the 1988 season, and the Redskins open up. I think it's their second game. The first game was a Monday night, as far as I remember, against the Giants, and then they played the Raiders on the West Coast. No, excuse me. The Raiders opened the season. That's right. The Raiders opened the season against somebody else, and then after the Giant game, or right before the Giant game, they traded Schrader to the Raiders for Jim Lachey. So Jim Lachey plays his opening game in Oakland. Or Los Angeles. I guess they were in Los Angeles at that point. And then he comes to the Redskins, and the Redskins go back to Los Angeles to play the second game. So that's sort of what's happening with Lattimore. His first game back in Washington is going to be coming up this week in New Orleans. Hopefully he's going to be ready to play on Sunday. Last thing from the news conferences yesterday, Kliff Kingsbury, and we played some of what he said in the last hour, that he's got real doubts about Bill Belichick as a head coach in college, but he's got worries of his own. Now he's lost two big weapons, one likely for the season, actually both of them likely for the season. Austin Eckler is out for at least until the Dallas game, and with his second concussion of the year, I don't know how realistic it is that he comes back. And Noah Brown, it was all but confirmed by Dan Quinn the other day that he's going to miss the rest of the season with an internal injury. So you got two big weapons that they relied on all year that they're not going to have, not only for the home stretch of the regular season, but if they get there going into the playoffs. And obviously that's a concern for Kingsbury.
That's the kind of million-dollar question. You got to see, where does that come from, that extra offense? Do we need to have different sets and run the ball more, or can we take more shots now? Is that something that's going to help us, get those yards back and maximize the guys who will be playing? And that's what we got to figure out over this next couple game stretch, is where does that come from? But it's hard to replace two guys like that, the protection they had and just the type of teammates and the effort they played with. But young guys get the opportunity, and we'll kind of see where it fits.
Yeah, Chris Rodriguez did an excellent job in the last game, so they're going to have to rely on him a lot more. Brian Robinson has been in and out with injury. You hope that with the bye week he got a chance to stay healthy, but this is the time of year. It's not going to be a factor Sunday in a dome stadium, but you got a home game against Philadelphia the week after that. You're going to be home against Atlanta, and then they would play Dallas, which has a dome stadium. So two of the four could be outdoor cold games where you have to run the football, and having Chris Rodriguez, who looks like he's going to be a contributor down the stretch, should really help them. All right, let me pivot back to Bill Belichick, and there are those who think great move for Belichick, great move for North Carolina. This is going to work out just great. He's a teacher. He knows football. And college football now is a lot more like the NFL than the NFL even is. It's more like the system that Belichick ran in New England, where he ran everything and he was in charge of everything. And he's going to thrive in this, and he's going to put the right people in place, and he's going to get the right kids to play for him and all that. Well, Stuart Mandel is with The Athletic, covers college football. He wrote a column yesterday predicting doom for this, saying it's not going to work, and explained why when he was on the Dan Patrick Show.
Well, Dan, I've been covering college football for 25 years. I have seen time and again NFL coaches come into college pledging to kind of reinvent the wheel, run an NFL program at the college level. It's never worked. The only guy that I've seen, and he was wildly successful, was Pete Carroll. That was not because of anything he had done in the NFL. He was a maniacal recruiter who surrounded himself with other maniacal recruiters. Bill Belichick has never recruited a day in his life. So I think that he's right. I think he said college is more like the NFL than it ever has been. And he's right about that in terms of the portal and NIL. And these teams are hiring salary cap experts now. But recruiting is still the lifeblood of the sport. And then I think another key element, the two things Nick Saban was so good at, recruiting and motivation. And, in the NFL, that's not really a part of it. Their motivation is their livelihood. You're talking about 18 to 22-year-old kids who, if you've seen it all this season, right? Guys who just don't show up for a game sometimes. And, I I think those are skills that are very unique to college. I don't know that, for all the great things he's done as a football coach, he hasn't had to do those things before.
But isn't free agency transfer portal?
Yeah, free agency is the transfer portal, but we've yet to see a program build itself entirely off the transfer portal. You can do it, Dion did it to basically purge the roster for a year, but now even he is, building it with high school kids for the long term. So I don't doubt he could come in. There's going to be a lot of buzz. There's going to be guys who absolutely want to come play for the 6-time Super Bowl champion, and that can work for a year. But how do you build a long-term program? I just don't think you can build a long-term program solely off we're gonna do the salary cap. We're gonna get the best free agents. At the end of the day, you still have to, ask a college coach what they spend a lot of time doing. It's DMing high school kids with little smiley face emojis. Come check out our campus. Like, that's a big part of it.
Yeah, but a lot of these coaches will pass that on to their assistant coaches. So if you have your offensive coordinator, your quarterback's coach, they're going to be DMing the quarterback. Bill Belichick can get on a Zoom call, talk to the kid and his family. I think we're underestimating Belichick's desire to prove that he can do this, that he is as researched as any coach in the history of sports has ever. He just doesn't walk into something and go, oh my gosh, wait a minute, I've got to do this. Or the collective is going to have money there. I think he's going to defer. Lombardi is going to, be his GM. He'll bring in some of his other assistant coaches. It just feels like this is, Belichick loves getting into the weeds and doing this stuff, or at least that's the feeling I get. I never underestimate him, even in a situation like this.
I definitely got the sense he has spent the year preparing for this. We've heard about this 300-page Bible that he sent.
Yeah.
His Pat McAfee interview, came off very prepared. There's no question about it. And I'll be curious to see who he hires. I mean, you mentioned Lombardi, also not a college guy. If he brings in some really good, experienced college recruiters, that will definitely help. But if the idea is we're going to just move the New England NFL franchise to Chapel Hill,
yeah,
I don't know. That you definitely need to have some guys who have a lot of experience at the college level.
Well, this is what Dion needed to do. I said Dion's not a great coach. Dion is a great CEO. He's a great brand. He brought in a pretty impressive staff. And I think that was important because, and this may be, Belichick's going to just coach. He goes into every game having an advantage of being a better coach than the guy across from the field. The question is, what kind of talent level can you bring in? And that will be the big challenge. I mean, the over-under is 6.5 wins next season. And that doesn't look like
Dion's biggest thing. Well, not his biggest thing, but one of the biggest things is he got to bring in his son.
Yes.
Who might be the first quarterback drafted, and Travis Hunter, who might be the number 1 pick.
Well, if I gave you Belichick with Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter,
that would be a great start. Yeah.
That would be 10 wins, or it'd be a disappointment.
Yeah. Well, who knows who's going to bring in, but the transfer portal changes a lot of things, and there's, I'm sure, is money from North Carolina, though. You kind of wonder about this, too. A school that's been a basketball school forever. I mean, that is the bluest of blood. They're right there with, Kentucky and Kansas and Duke and schools like that, North Carolina. That's one of the elite. If you made a list of the top 10 basketball programs of all time in college, North Carolina would be on it. Do you get these boosters to contribute to football? You might, because that's where the real money is. Kirk Cignetti said that when he went to Indiana, which is also on that list of the top 10 basketball schools. He said the bulk of the money for television comes from football. So you're going to have to make a significant investment in that. They got the right guy, obviously, and they gave him a contract where they clearly want him to stay, and he got him into the playoff. I don't know how much more money that means to the school, but plenty. They're going to play at Notre Dame a week from tonight. So there could be that. But, you've got people there who are used to praying at the altar of Dean Smith, and now you're going to say, okay, we need your money for football. Now, it's a recognizable name. Obviously, if he's not the best coach of all time, he's in the discussion. But how you raise those funds, and that's probably 75 to 80% of it. It's how much can you pay me, which brings me to this. And this, you could have knocked me over with a feather on this. In fact, I'll test Isaac on this. You may have heard that Billy Edwards, who's been the starting quarterback this past year and a backup for a couple of years at Maryland, is going into the transfer portal, right? Because they got Malik Washington, who's like one of the top guys in the country from Spalding, may even start as a true freshman next year. Okay? The reports are, this is amazing, that he's going to Michigan, where they have signed the number one player in the country, Bryce Underwood. You want to guess what the report is, what Billy Edwards is going to get to go to Michigan?
I think I'm going to go on the rough end of the low $1 million or like $500K.
It was $1 million. $1 million for Billy Edwards. Billy Edwards.
Wow.
Yeah. He's an experienced quarterback. He also, I guess, fits kind of the Michigan mold in that he runs. $1 million for Billy Edwards. Man, that's something, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. $1 million to be the backup, presumed backup.
Well,
actually.
or the quarterback that is sort of the rabbit, like, you know, when Underwood's ready to play, you know, he will play. But yeah, $1 million to go to Michigan. Billy Edwards. You would think if you got, there's two things going for you here. Money is one of them. The other part's Michigan. You know, that's when we talk about blue blood football programs. That's on the list too. So. Jeez. And I would say, you know, not to disparage Billy Edwards, but I would say to Michigan, really? You're waving around $1 million? That's the best you can get? Maybe it is. I don't know. And I guess also because of the way he hung when they had Talia Tagovailoa for a couple of years and didn't complain, didn't enter the transfer portal again, that maybe they feel like he's got the right makeup for that spot. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a big reason why, you know, he has some sense of loyalty. He's acting as a professional, and as you say, we're transitioning to
good
a
for him.
thing.
I congratulate Billy Edwards for doing this. There's no question about that. I say, good for you, young man. You know, I'm a capitalist. I have tried to make as much money as I can in my career. I get that, but. That is stunning, and you know the jump from a program like Maryland, which, you know, a good year is 7 or 8 wins, to Michigan, where it's a bad year unless you beat Ohio State, that you don't win 9 or 10, and in most years you're hopefully going to compete for the national championship. That's surprising to me. Also, this is something that 4 years ago, I would have bet the mortgage that Odell Beckham would be in Washington by this afternoon. The Dolphins have released him today, and I think he's probably done, but he had signed a 1-year, $3 million deal. They had a bunch of incentives in there. It could have been worth over $8 million, but he was coming off knee surgery in the offseason, and, you know, he's had kind of an up and down run last 5-6 years with injuries, and he made his debut in the first week of October, played against the Patriots. In 9 games, he finished with 9 catches for 55 yards. And they thought he could be the number 3 receiver behind Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, but it never happened for him. But if Dan Snyder were still running this team, Odell Beckham would be here on a private plane today. And that's how this team used to operate. And I'm guessing, even though they have a need for a receiver, they signed this guy from New England, and he's had pretty good years with Minnesota in recent years. So there's really, they don't really need him. But, you know, if you knew that you were going to have Noah Brown out for the rest of the season, yeah, they would go after Beckham. But I don't know. Somebody may pick him up. You know, would you be surprised if he winds up in Dallas? I would think. And Miami's playing pretty well. They won 4 of their last 5, but they're up against it at 6 and 7, and are going to have a tough time making the playoffs. So we're going to see about that. Be interested to see what happens tonight with the Wizards. Not that I can probably stomach watching them play, but what they did last weekend, and it got buried in the football, but Denver coming to Washington, the champions of 2 years ago, with the best player getting over 50 points, and they still won the game. So this is the kind of thing, this is the NBA, that it would be considered an upset, but with the number of games that they play and how teams are sometimes disinterested, especially if you got a 3-win team going to Cleveland to play the 21-4 Cleveland Cavaliers. And that could be a game where the Wizards lose by 50, or it could be a game where they win. And that's just the way the NBA works. And Isaac, have you been interested in this in-season tournament at all? Does this catch your interest?
It does, because it kind of adds the stakes to the season, but I can see where it's kind of gotten stale this year just because of the play a little bit.
And year. I mean, this got a bigger bump last year than most people thought it would. And I heard Tony talking about it yesterday. Wilbon was off because Wilbon probably would have gotten upset about this, but Tony said that the ratings were down this year pretty significantly. And remember last year we had LeBron. They made a run. LeBron, is he taking some time off? I think he's
yes, he is.
Yeah, it sounds to me, and they discussed this the other day on the Dan Patrick Show, that there's some rumors going around that he's going to announce his retirement at the All-Star break, play out the rest of the season, but this is going to be his last year, and then or he could try and engineer himself a trade to another team, maybe to Golden State before the end of the year. So I don't know, that could happen. And then let me throw in the Caps here. Let's that is, you think of surprising teams in sports this year. 2 of them are right here. I mean, even as good as people thought Jaden Daniels could be, I don't think anybody would figure that 13 games into their season with 4 to go that they would be pretty comfortably heading towards the playoffs. I think that's been a surprise. And the Caps, you could fill a thimble with my hockey knowledge, but I would tell you this. The feeling I had was, oh, God, you're going to have to drag Alex Ovechkin along, make sure he gets the record, and somehow, keep a team that's building and maybe – they're good. They're really good. And 10 straight on the road, and they find ways to win. They were, not on their best game last night. They go to overtime, and they win. That's remarkable. That is – and they're playing without Ovechkin, and I thought Ovechkin might be in some ways – maybe I should have known the way he's, proved all the doubters wrong, and even the year that they won the Stanley Cup where he thought, okay, maybe it's time to trade him and get out of the Ovechkin business. He was an asset, not a liability, and then he goes out. He's the leading scorer in the league when he went out with the broken leg. He's been out for over 3 weeks, like 3.5 weeks. They continue to win, and then he's supposed to come back, they said, after the first of the year. I'm not so sure it won't happen before that. I saw a video of him skating last week, so that's a great story, and to have 2 of them. Now, the Wizards are a complete embarrassment, and Ted's got, I guess, both ends of the spectrum with a surprisingly good hockey team and a not so surprisingly bad basketball team. Although it's surprising how bad they are, that they are. And the two wins that they had early in the season against the Hawks, who are great right now. They're great. They're winning everything. They just wanted to beat the Knicks. They're in the semifinals of the in-season tournament. Crazy. Just nuts. All right, coming up, we'll do Ravens preview. Brian Wacker of the Baltimore Sun will join us as the Ravens get ready to play in New York on Sunday. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.